receivers. And that leads to another thing that he got asked about yesterday. Be cut number 8 here, Dave. How has his head coaching experience changed his approach and perspective now that he's gone back to being a position coach?
It hasn't changed a bit, because when I became a head coach, I didn't change one thing. I just went from coaching a group of 10 or 12 or 15, 16 offensive linemen to coaching 120. That was my group. So I never changed as a coach. I never let my individual coaching talent go away, because I always found a group I wanted to teach. If I was working, when I was at Georgia State, I would work with the scout team offensive line. That was my group, because I wanted to be a coach still. And when I say be a coach, it's sometimes being a head coach, you're the loneliest man in the room, because you've kind of gotten your group taken away from you. So when everybody goes to meetings, you go back to your office, maybe watch special teams or some third downs, but you're not in there with a group. But it feels really good to come back and have my own group again, have a group that I walk into every single day, familiar faces that I see each and every meeting. You become more involved in their life. You know their backgrounds. You know the ins and outs of their day and their night, and it's just thrilling. But like I said, for me, being a head coach really didn't change who I was. I kept it consistent in what I did, and that's how I do it here.
You would think it'd actually kind of be a little bit easier now, right? Where you go from having to manage an entire team and having to have your fingerprints over so many different aspects of your team to now not being singularly focused, because, again, he is the tight ends coach and the run game coordinator, but having a little less to manage overall, which, again, for a guy that spent, 7 years at Georgia State, having to worry about the entire team, being singularly more narrowly focused on, okay, what are my tight ends doing? And then what am I doing as far as cooking up the best run game? So hopefully that can lead to a lot of success. And from everything that we've heard from players so far, players that can remember his name at least, if you didn't catch that, Oscar Attaway the other day when he was talking to the media could not remember Coach Elliott's name, and he just was talking about the intense guy, which is probably how a lot of players remember him. But his time working with these players hopefully goes a long way, and we kind of get that run game back on track this upcoming season, as well as utilize the tight ends really well, which, again, that's his primary job at the end of the day, is being the tight ends coach. And you feel like you've got a good situation with Josh Simon coming back, who was the 2 to Trey Knox a season ago, and a guy that's played a lot of football going back to his time in Western Kentucky, that should be able to step up and have a good season coming up this fall. And then Brady Hunt, who was highly touted coming in, just his size alone, being at 6'6", there's a lot of things you can do with a with the tight end like that. So hopefully a lot of success on multiple areas of the offense that Shawn Elliott's going to have his fingerprints off on for this upcoming fall. But good to hear from him. Still sounds as intense as ever. And I was listening to what Jen said about going to Ladies' Day last week on the early game, in the hour before. And sounds like the intensity does not stop with his own football players. That extends to everybody, even when he's doing the demonstrations for Ladies' Day as well. So that's certainly good to hear. As always, you can check us out on the Game TV, sponsored by our friends over at Shepherd's Glass. Go to youtube.com, search the Game TV. Watch it all day long. You can also pull us up on the 107.5 The Game app. Take us with you wherever you go. Just go to the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, and give us a download and listen to the 107.5 The Game wherever you go. As mentioned a few minutes ago, big series this weekend coming up down in Gainesville as baseball takes on Florida, looking for revenge to the end of last season. We'll dive into that matchup a little bit, hear what Coach Kingston had to say about the Gators for this matchup coming up starting tonight. That's next. It is the Extra Point. Todd Head along with you on your Friday on The Game.
Obviously, with them, it starts with Caglione, both from the pitching standpoint and the offensive side. He's a dominant performer in both areas, and so you've got to be very cognizant of him and what he can do to beat you. So it starts with that. They're an elite defensive team, as they generally are, and it's Florida. Again, they're going to have a very competitive mindset. They always have, they always will, and you've got to respect their ability to win games. They've struggled some in the midweeks, but they've also had some really good weekends. So we respect that. We respect the program and respect going down into their ballpark, because in this league, that's always a challenge.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Points Outhead with you on this Friday. And again, big series coming up this weekend for the Gamecocks as they head on the road down to Gainesville to take on the Gators. Again, first game coming up tonight at 6:30. Pregame coverage starting at 6:15 right here on the game. That was Coach Kingston giving a little bit of a scouting report earlier on this week when talking to the media. And Florida's kind of been a really weird team so far this year. They are, like South Carolina, sitting at 6-6 in conference play, but as opposed to South Carolina, that's only won the one series out of the 4 that they've played so far. Florida's actually won 3 of their 4 series and beating some pretty good teams in doing so. They beat Texas A&M, who, again, South Carolina recently lost to. They went on the road to Baton Rouge and beat LSU. They also beat Mississippi State as well. So 3 very, very solid conference wins as far as the series goes so far, with Florida taking 2 out of 3 in all 3 of those series. But then they got swept by Missouri this past weekend, and Missouri is at the bottom of the barrel in the SEC. So kind of a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde situation when you talk about the you talk about the Florida Gators, who coupled with that sweeping loss to Missouri this past weekend, also got beaten pretty soundly by Florida State by 15 runs in their midweek contest, and they've gotten swept by the Seminoles this year, the first time that's happened with their in-state rival since the year 2000. So again, for a team that a season ago was runner-up in the College World Series, not exactly the start that they were probably expecting, being roughly halfway through conference play as of right now. And obviously, Florida en route to go into the College World Series and eventually coming up short to LSU, took care of South Carolina in the Gainesville Super Regional, sent the Gamecocks home packing after taking both those games down there in the middle of June last year. Here is Coach Kingston, cut number 7 from yesterday's list here, Dave, reflecting on how the Gamecock season ended down there a year ago.
We lost the chance to go to Omaha. I mean, that's what sticks out. We went there as a very hot team, a team that had the ability to be one of the best 8 teams in the country. I think when all was said and done, we were one of the best 8 teams in the country, but we had to go on the road to the team that ended up finishing second in the country, and we lost the series. So that's what stands out. It was a team, we had an Omaha team, there's no question about it, but because of some injuries that led to some losses that led to having to go on the road for a super regional instead of hosting, we missed out on an opportunity to go to Omaha. That's what I'll take with me, but I'll also remember all the great things that we did that year, and it was the last time with Wimmer and McGillis and Mahoney and Sanders and Hall and all those guys. I remember that too, just being in the dugout, knowing that journey with that group of guys was over, and so you remember the good and the bad always.
So there's a little bit of a revenge factor going into this weekend. This is a Florida team that you handled when they came to Founders Park in the regular season last year, but weren't able to beat them when it really counted there in the postseason. So there's that motivating factor of wanting to go down there and kind of get your lick back a little bit this upcoming weekend. And a great Florida team a season ago, again, obviously ended up being the runner-up. So when you look at South Carolina, who I think we all agree was an Omaha caliber team last year, they just ran into the wrong opponent in the Super Regional. Had they been up against somebody else, maybe they would have had a better shot at making it to Omaha at the end of the day. But again, when the Florida team ends up being the runner-up, it's hard to look at that and say, well, we should have beaten them, because that just ended up being a really good Florida team. That being said, this was a Florida team that lost so many of those key contributors from a season ago. Wyatt Langford went high in the draft. Josh Rivera, their shortstop, had a very good season last year. And who could forget Brandon Sproat and Hurston Waldrop coming off the mound against South Carolina last year. Hurston Waldrop had the game of his freaking life, pitching 8 innings, only giving up, I think, 3 runs and shutting out the Gamecocks in that last game of the season for them down there in Gainesville. So this is a much, much different team, not to mention guys like B.T. Ryapol, who finally graduated at the end of last season. He was played a vital role in catching for them a season ago. So this is a much, much different team this time around for Florida that is struggling offensively. They're hitting a lot of home runs, which is great, but they're struggling to even get on base otherwise. And this hopefully serves as an opportunity for South Carolina's pitching staff to get things back on track, as it's been a lot of up and downs. Where this past weekend you had the starting pitching struggled, the bullpen pitched really great, and at other times you've had the starting pitching look really good, and the bullpen hasn't exactly backed things up very, very well. So hopefully against a team in Florida that does hit a lot of home runs, like they are still good at hitting for power, but getting on base otherwise has been quite a struggle for them so far this season. So again, hopefully that can prove beneficial to South Carolina's pitching staff. Now, there are names that you are going to remember from a season ago. Guys like Jack Caglione, who is essentially college's version of Shohei Ohtani, who pitches and hits as well, in addition to playing first base. He'll be their Sunday starter for the weekend, by the way. But leading the team in batting average, as you would expect, number 1 in home runs overall with 17 so far this season. But again, the production around him, not as good as it was a season ago. You do have a guy in Colby Shelton who transferred over from Alabama as a third baseman. If you remember, he was a guy that a lot of people thought may have the potential to come to South Carolina, given that his family is local to the area. I believe out there in Lexington, obviously ended up going to Florida, where he is playing shortstop, and he's hit 15 home runs, so very much in line with what the rest of the team is doing with hitting for power pretty well, but he's also struck out 40 times, which is tied for, which is second on the team, or third on the team, behind Ty Evans and Cade Kirkland. So it's kind of feast or famine, kind of similar to Ethan Petrie in a lot of ways, where it's like he's either hitting a home run or striking out. So again, hopefully that's something that South Carolina can take advantage of for this upcoming weekend series. And on the flip side of things, this is a Florida staff that as a whole is struggling when it comes to their mound production. They have the worst staff ERA in the SEC, and they allow the second most walks in the conference too, which again, South Carolina being so disciplined at the plate, that's hopefully something that can play in their factor as the weekend series goes along. We'll be talking to Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central, checking in and getting his thoughts on this upcoming baseball series in just a moment. But do want to let you know that coming up later on this afternoon, the halftime show, it's just going to be me today flying solo from 12 to 3. We're going to be out at TEC Equipment Rental at 2025 Old Dunbar Road out in West Columbia. Go by and see us. Believe we're going to be set up outside because it's such a nice day. So come by and see us. We'll have, T-shirts and stuff like that to give away. And come by and learn a little bit about TEC Equipment Rental as well. So certainly looking forward to that. Again, that's going to be from noon until 3 for the halftime show. I'll be out there the entire time flying solo, and we'll have some of our promotions people out there as well. But certainly looking forward to that, hanging out at TEC Equipment Rental, again, 2025 Old Dunbar Road. Talk to Jack Felcher from Gamecock Central, get his thoughts on this baseball series, and look at things from South Carolina's perspective coming up. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on a beautiful Friday here in Columbia on The Game. I'm sitting here watching golf on the TV in the studio, and man, it is picturesque out there in Augusta, and I certainly wish I could be out there this weekend taking it all, the sights and sounds. But if you can't make it out to Augusta like myself this weekend, there's no better place to take in golf's first major of the year than with wall-to-wall TVs and all the amazing food and beer you can drink over with our friends at Twin Peaks down in the Vista. They're also featuring a new menu addition for this weekend, the Tito's Transfusion, for just $8 all day long. Come in and catch all the great golf action as well as delicious food. And again, those 29-degree draft beers all weekend long while the golf's happening with our friends at Twin Peaks down in the Vista. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on this Friday morning here on The Game. Huge weekend. We're just talking about baseball in that last segment, and we'll get into that with our guy Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central in just a second. But, Jack, I do have to start off. I heard you made your way out to Augusta National for the first time this week. How was that?
Oh, baby, I am glad you asked about that. First off, thank you for having me on, as always. It was my first time going. Shout out to my good buddy Jordan K. from the state for inviting me to come out. Big shout to him. None of it's possible without him. But it was a great time, man. First time out there. It's the best way I've described it is like it's like going to Disneyland, right? It's that kind of atmosphere where everyone's so nice. You walk through the gates, and it's like you're going into heaven, basically. It's insane. It's otherworldly. The food, cheap, nice and good. The pro shop, expensive but worth it. Seeing Tiger Woods play, insane. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience right there. One of the all-time greats. Other guys like Justin Thomas, Fred Couples, Dustin Johnson, Max Homa, guys like that. It was unbelievable. But yeah, it was an amazing day on Tuesday.
Well, it's on everybody's sports bucket list, and I hope to experience the same thing one day myself. But really cool that you got to go out there and experience that. Of course, this weekend, a big series for the Gamecock baseball team as they head down to Gainesville. Sounds like you're on the way down there right now, actually, as first pitch coming up tonight at 6:30. And this is a Florida team I talked about in the last segment, a little bit weird so far this season. They've won series, but they're on a bit of a 4-game skid right now, losing to Missouri and then losing to Florida State in their midweek contest on Tuesday. Is South Carolina catching them at the right time, or is this kind of one of those trap scenarios, you think?
That's a great question, because it could literally go either way. Could Florida continue to struggle? Yes. I don't expect that. I expect Florida to play a lot better this weekend. So South Carolina is going to be getting Florida's best, in my opinion. Where South Carolina can win this matchup is in pitching, right? I think they have the better trio of pitchers going out there. Florida's team ERA, I think, is like over 6 this year. And outside of Jack Caglione, their pitching staff is kind of a mess. You got Brandon Neely, who was the closer last year for this team, as a Friday night starter this week, I believe. So we'll see what happens, but I think South Carolina with Becker, Good, and Jones that's a good 1-2-3 punch to start the weekend off.
Again, talking to our guy Jack Felcher from Gamecock Central, previewing the baseball series with Florida coming up this weekend. And that was the 3 starters announced yesterday, with Eli Jones staying in the Friday role, Ty Good getting the Saturday start, and then Matthew Becker sliding in on Sunday. There's been so much movement and rotation with this starting 3 for South Carolina this year. Do you think it's more advantageous to eventually find a consistent 3, or do you think they just keep going with kind of the trends of how the year's gone so far?
Well, I think about it this way. I think you're going to have to kind of keep going with this mix and shuffle of guys, just because that is baseball at the end of the day. Every weekend's different. Matchups are different. There could be a weekend where you're facing all left-handed batters, and maybe you want to throw Matthew Becker and another lefty out there. I'm just, thinking about it that way. But also think about it this way when it comes to postseason play. Like with the SEC tournament, for instance. If you end up making it all the way, you're going to have to use more starting pitchers, and that means, you're throwing different guys out there and stuff, and for different matchups. And then once you get to the regionals and super regionals, you could start with your normal rotation, but at the same time, if you're playing 4 or 5 games, you're going to have to pitch different guys. So I think it also helps South Carolina in a way, because if it's not the same starting 3 out there every weekend, it creates a little bit more, homework and research for the other teams to kind of scout and figure out, okay, how are we going to, hit with this guy on the mound.
When you look at this Florida team as far as batting goes, they're a little bit of an anomaly, because they still hit for power really, really well like they did a season ago. One of the best teams in the SEC when it comes to home runs. But other than that, really struggling to get on base. How does South Carolina, go into this weekend from a pitching standpoint, trying to limit that power?
Well, I think first off, you have to figure out a way. They have to have a really good plan for Jack Caglione, who's their 3-hole hitter, I believe. But wherever he's hitting in the order, he's a phenomenal player, 2-way player. He's like the Shohei Ohtani of college baseball, in my opinion. But I think you have to pitch around him a little bit. If you have to intentionally walk him from time to time, do it. I think it's worth it. You have to be careful with this line, because they have other power threats besides Cags. They have a guy like Colby Shelton or Tyler Shelnut or guys like that can go out there and do some damage. So I think you just have to be careful. You don't want to fall behind in counts. Try to limit the walks a little bit. But I think with guys like Becker and Good, and even Jones that pitch really well and don't usually get up a ton of walks right now. I think that's a good sign for South Carolina.
Fridays have been a struggle for South Carolina in all their SEC series, minus the one they won against Vanderbilt a couple weeks back. And a lot of that stems from not having a lot of production at the top of the lineup. As you mentioned, Brandon Neely is being slided into the Friday role now. But even he, in his past couple weeks, has struggled against the likes of Mississippi State, had an okay outing against a very bad Mizzou team. Is this an opportunity for South Carolina to get back on track offensively in a Friday night setting?
Yeah, I think you have to set the tone right out of the gate. I think you need to just, like you said, your top of the order guys need to be hitting better, and I think they have. I like the shuffle that Kingston did on Sunday, I believe, where you slide Nolan to the 3-hole. I believe you moved Kennedy Jones up to the 2-hole. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure it's those guys at the top of the order. But either way, you're getting Cole Messina back this weekend more likely than not, which is a big plus. So I think having those top of the order bats do some damage right away is a big sign. It would be great, and then I think that kind of carries over with the rest of the lineup, which honestly the 5 through 9 typically, especially against Charlotte or UNC the other day, was definitely struggling a little bit.
Again, talking to Jack Felcher from Gamecock Central as the baseball team takes on Florida. First pitch coming up tonight at 6:30, pregame coverage starting at 6:15 right here on the game. One thing that I do know is going to play into South Carolina's favor is the fact that Florida is one of the worst teams in the SEC when it comes to walking opponents, currently third with 146 walks so far this season. But they also have a fair amount of strikeouts, which that's kind of been the Jekyll and Hyde with South Carolina this year. Is yes, they're good at drawing walks, but they also strike out quite a bit too. How do you see this playing for the team this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, South Carolina does strike out a lot. I think that's their identity at this point. They're a team that strikes out a lot, but they somehow find a way to win most of the time. So the key, I think, is if they are going to get walked a ton, you hope that your bats in the lineup are able to drive them in. And what I mean is, if you have a guy that gets walked immediately, and it's someone like a Will Tippett or whoever, I think you're going to bunt in most cases and move the runner up to second with one out. Now it's on whoever's in the order to go ahead and drive that guy in. And I think that's kind of going to be the one of the big keys to this series is that if South Carolina's going to get on base, are they going to be able to bring runs across? Because, look, if it weren't for Dylan Brewer the other night up in Charlotte, South Carolina might end up losing that game because they were 1 for 10 with runners in score position, which is not good at all. And they really do have to be better in those spots. And look, it doesn't help when they do strike out a ton, but if you can just do your job at key moments, I think you have a chance.
Last one for you here. Coach Kingston touched on this a little bit the other day when talking to the media. This is where your season came to an end last year in the Super Regional down there in Gainesville. Hurston Waldrop pitched that gem of a game and shut South Carolina out. How much of the revenge factor plays into South Carolina's motivation going down there this weekend?
Something asked about a good bit, talked about. They still definitely remember what happened last year. How could you not? That was just a series where you're 2 wins away from going to, the biggest stage in college baseball. And look, that's the standard for South Carolina at this point. You want to get to Omaha every year, and when you fall short, it sucks. So, there was a lot of hurt on that team, and look, a lot of things have changed since then. Florida's lost some guys. There's no Hurston Waldrop. There's no BT Riopelle. There's no Wyatt Langford anymore. But for South Carolina, they have to, you can't let it just be solely revenge. You also have to go out there and play good baseball. And I think this weekend, look, whoever wins this series this weekend, it is almost their Super Regional away, because whoever wins this series kind of gets that momentum back and that swagger back that kind of carries into these last, 5 SEC series of the year. But, definitely there is revenge on the minds of South Carolina, but I think you have to, at the end of the day, you have to go out there and try to play good baseball, whether it's about revenge or not.
Well, it should be a good one. Looking forward to it. Safe travels down there, and we'll check in with you next week, hopefully talking about a series victory as we get set for a couple of very tough teams at Kentucky and Arkansas the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, man. Thank you as always. Always appreciate it. Have a great weekend, dude.
Absolutely. Again, Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central making his way down to Gainesville for the series this weekend. Come back, wrap up hour number one. Gamecock Larry wants to weigh in on some things. I'm sure he's got some thoughts on the Florida Gators coming up for this weekend series. We'll hit that coming up. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you. Kevin A producing on the other side of the glass here on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head with you on this Friday. Busy weekend ahead. As talked about it, the Masters going on. Obviously, right now, as the first round is wrapping up because of the delay in the weather from yesterday. Baseball down in Gainesville this weekend. Also, don't forget the National Championship Parade for the women's basketball team also going to be taking place downtown on Sunday starting at 2 o'clock. Weather's going to be absolutely beautiful. Come out, enjoy it with your friends and family, and celebrate another national championship for Dawn Staley and her crew. Again, hard to believe it's almost been a week since that happened. Gamecock Larry has been holding on the Love Chevrolet phone lines. He wants to weigh in on what's going on with Gamecock sports. Gamecock Larry, hadn't heard from you in a while. Always good to hear from you. What's on your mind this morning?
Well, I've got a few things I want to say, so let me talk slow. But thank the good Lord I got my Gamecock Larry dragster and motocross team to follow this weekend. Basketball's over. Got my blood sugar running right finally. Got the sleep habit still messed up, but that's okay. But the dragster team going up to Union tomorrow night, and then they're going up to New Ellington Friday night, and New Ellington Saturday night. And then Uncle Jimmy going to have a big old cookout grand opening something. Boy, anyway, they my buddies, they my dragster, motocross, barbecue, all, that's my Gamecock Larry's team. But let me tell you, this is not a Gamecock baseball team. I don't care what they say. This is the fifth weekend of the weekend series of the season, right?
Right.
I think it's the fifth.
Yeah, you're correct.
And still searching for a starting lineup. Still searching for a starting pitching rotation. Fifth weekend series. This is not Gamecock baseball. This is not Gamecock baseball. I ain't gonna say no more. If we don't win this series in Florida this weekend, well, like I say, you know what I mean, but I ain't gonna say it. But I'm telling you, this is not a Gamecock baseball team. I don't know who the hitting coach is. I don't know whether it's Monty Lee, Kingston, or whoever they got. 16 strikeouts the other night. 46 strikeouts in 3 games. If it wasn't for the pitching, we would be way, way down. Again, old Gamecock Larry said, this is not a Gamecock baseball team. And my Clark brothers over there keep my dragster motocross team and barbecue, keep them going, because I'll be listening to you all and talking to you all, because I'm about to give. Well, this is not a Gamecock baseball team, and you old fans know what I'm talking about. You understand. But all I got to say after all that is go Gamecocks. Talk to you later. Have a good weekend. Love all y'all. Talk to you later.
Yeah, appreciate it as always, Gamecock Larry. And you know what? Gamecock Larry brings up some good points there. This is definitely a series you got to have if you're Gamecock baseball. As he mentioned, this is the 5th series of the season so far. You have dropped 3 of your prior 4. Now, the one that you did win against Vanderbilt, very impressive. You swept them at home. That is not an easy thing to do, as they came in here the number 3 team in the country. But all these other series, you've kind of fallen into the same formula. You dropped the first 2 games of the series. You managed to win the 3rd one, which, hey, that's better than getting swept. And you are still 6-6, which is salvageable. But you got to get back in the win column. You know what I mean? Like, if nothing else, for momentum's sake. Because as I mentioned to Jack a little bit earlier, you're looking at Kentucky and Arkansas, the legit 2 best teams in all the SEC coming up over these next couple weeks. They're combined 22-2 in conference play. If you can't get Florida this weekend, let's say you stick to the norm and you drop 2 out of 3 to where you're suddenly 7-9 in conference play going into those next 2 matchups. And let's say at best, you come away 3-3. Then you're, doing math in my head here, 10-12. So you're behind the 8 ball with only a couple more conference series to go. And yes, being just above 500 can still put you in a pretty good standings, but that's a tall task. And again, even splitting 3-3 against Arkansas and Kentucky is not going to be easy. So yes, this is a big series for South Carolina this weekend. Got to get back on track. Got to take at least 2 out of 3 out of them down there in Gainesville. And that starts tonight. Again, Fridays have been a huge struggle for South Carolina this season. Brandon Neely, as I mentioned, on the mound for the game or for the Gators tonight. Hasn't had the best outing the past couple weeks in his Friday starts. You got to take advantage of that. You got to get on base. You got to bring guys in. Stop leaving them on base. Take advantage of a pitching staff from Florida that is struggling. Get a lot of runs across the plate. Hold them at bay for an offense that's also struggling as well. Like, on paper, South Carolina should be able to handle this team. And if not, then we've got bigger problems coming away from the weekend, heading into the next series. But fingers crossed. Let's hope South Carolina can get it done down there in Gainesville, and we are feeling better about this team come Monday morning. 1 hour in the books, another hour to go of the Extra Point. We'll drive back into some coach audio. Coach DeCamillis talking to the media yesterday about what's going on with special teams. We'll dive into that coming up in hour number 2. It is the Extra Point. He's Captain Dave. I'm Tyler Head with you here on The Game. Hour number 2, welcome back in. It is the Extra Point here on The Game. Tyler Head along with you, Cap and Dave producing on the other side of the glass. Jumping back into the spring football conversation as, again, got a little over a week to go with the spring game coming up next Saturday night at 7 o'clock, which, by the way, we'll have full coverage for you here on The Game of that to wrap up the spring portion of practice for the Gamecocks, and then we'll look ahead to the transfer portal and all that stuff. As the portal is actually set to open up on Tuesday, which Beamer talked about this the other day. That is kind of an interesting dynamic with South Carolina, is they will be wrapping up spring practice as the portal is opening. Now, they will have some dedicated staff members that are going to be on top of who's going into the portal and who South Carolina could potentially bring in, but it'll be the start of the following week before we really see which South Carolina Gamecocks are probably going to be entering the portal, as they'll have those, assessment interviews that they do with all their players after wrapping up spring practice, kind of give them a gauge of where they are, in the pecking order and what their potential is for this upcoming fall. And they do that for honesty purposes to allow these guys to kind of get a sense of where they stand. And if they choose to go in the transfer portal after that, then that's on them. And, they can seek opportunities elsewhere. And with that can free up scholarship opportunities for South Carolina, potentially bringing more talent to shore up some other areas on their team. So all that coming up within the course of about the next week or so when it comes to South Carolina. One area we haven't talked about a whole lot with this Gamecock team so far through spring has been special teams. And it's interesting because there's a lot of questions about special teams, going in. And when you're South Carolina, you've created this reputation around that third side of the football. And everybody takes special teams seriously around the country because, it can make or break your team, or it can make or break games and your season as well. But South Carolina takes to another level, and all that revolves around, the Beamer ball aspect of it and the lineage of Shane Beamer and special teams going back to his, father's time at Virginia Tech. You also coupled that with the fact that you had Pete Lembo, who was respected from a national standpoint as perhaps the best special teams coach in the country, and was solely focused on doing that. So many teams around the country will have a special teams coordinator that's also coaching another position or is doing a couple of different things on the team in addition to doing special teams. Pete Lembo, while also being like associate head coach, was solely focused on what was happening from a special team standpoint, and South Carolina thrived because of that. I mean, regarded as one of the best special teams unit in the entire country for the past couple of years. Now, this past year was obviously a step backwards in some ways, but Coach Lembo was able to still leverage his prior head coaching experience, in addition to what he's been able to do with special teams here at South Carolina, to now being the coach at the University of Buffalo. But again, last season wasn't exactly what they were hoping for. And Lembo talked about it whenever he talked to the media, and Coach Beamer was adamant about it as well, that there was room for, improvement. And when it becomes the calling card of your team in a way, it's going to be analyzed a lot closer, not only within your own building, but from a national standpoint as well. And people looked at what South Carolina was doing in some aspects of special teams and saying, man, that's not a South Carolina-esque special teams unit that we've seen in years past. There were, bad snaps on kicks, and there were, kicks out of bounds, and there were botched extra points, and, wrong formations, and being offsides, and just little things that you would think a well-oiled unit like South Carolina would not be subject to making mistakes with. And unfortunately, that happened more than they'd like to see it happen a season ago. Certainly some areas that South Carolina wants to clean up for this fall. And you need to improve, obviously, and you have a daunting schedule ahead of you in 2024 that we've talked about plenty. And when you have this area of the game that you put a specific focus on more than, maybe any other team in the country, certainly more than a lot of them do, that could be the make or break in a lot of these games. where, you know, you're playing Oklahoma, you're playing Alabama. If you can get a special teams turnover or a special teams score in one of those games, then that could be the difference between losing by 3 and maybe winning by 4, for all we know. So again, hopefully that unit, you know, a little bit sharper this year than it was a season ago. And I think South Carolina did the perfect thing when it came to finding Pete Limbo's replacement, because how do you replace the best college special teams coordinator in the entire country? Where you go to the NFL and you find a guy that has been, or you go and find a guy that's been in the NFL for basically 30 years, focusing on nothing but special teams in Joe DeCamillis, and you bring him in. Now, yes, he did spend the past season at Texas, but the bulk of his experience is at the NFL level and solely focused on special teams, like again Pete Limbo was here at South Carolina. So bringing a lot of ideas and experience to the table is certainly going to be a good thing for this special teams unit. But you know, there is a lot on the plate of Joe DeCamillis in ironing out all the details of special teams for this upcoming season, and that starts with the kicking battle, which is something that he's going to be dealing with not only through the spring but probably through summer and fall camp as well. Cut number 10 from today's list here, Dave. This is Coach DeCamillis yesterday talking about that kicking battle and where things stand right now.
With Alex, he ended up getting a little bit of a heel injury right before we started, so he's been limited in quite a few practices early on. Ended up hitting some balls today, which is good to see. You know, so it's been a little bit of a struggle for him so far. But the other guys, I'll tell you, Joyce has done a good job for us. Some of the guys that have been here in the past, we've had a good competition so far there, so it's good to see.
Having a good kicker is something that I feel like far too often as fans we don't appreciate enough, because when kicks become automatic for the most part, it just becomes routine. Like, all right, Mitch Jeter's trotting out there, he's going to make this kick, and 92% of the time he did that in his time here at South Carolina. Now, he was perfect in 2022, missed a couple in 2023, but still overall really, really good numbers. And when you suddenly don't have that anymore, and let's say you're missing kicks, or you're just not even feeling confident enough in your kicking unit to take chances of kicking things from maybe 45 yards out or something like that, which is something that, you know, Mitch Jeter gave you the option to do, you start to notice, and it starts to add up. And now you're looking towards Alex Herrera, and he mentioned William Joyce as well, as your options. And you know, sure, they are performing well in practice, from what it sounds like. Herrera dealing with a little bit of an injury there, but these are two guys that just don't have a ton of experience in the college game so far. And when they get in there in a high-pressure kick situation against maybe Kentucky in week number 2, how are they going to handle that? Are they ready for the bright lights of that moment? That's what we don't know. You also have Mason Love coming in. He's going to be more of a punter/kickoff guy, it sounds like. So it does sound like the true kicking job is between Alex Herrera and William Joyce. You also bring up the question of what kind of bag of tricks does Joe DeCamillis bring in? Now, he did plenty of tricks and fakes in his time in the NFL, and he's no stranger to working with a puncher with a really good arm. He had Joe Hecker for a season when he was out there in Los Angeles with the Rams a couple of years ago. And, of course, Kai Kroger returning for South Carolina was a very, very consistent thrower when it comes to running those fakes, which is a good weapon to have at your disposal at any time. Saw them do that a time or two a season ago, but certainly not as much as people would have hoped. The unfortunate part is the more it becomes your signature, the more people are aware of it, the more likely they're going to be looking out for it, where you can't catch them by surprise. Hopefully, Joe DeCamillis brings some good ideas and schemes to the table, and South Carolina can be successful once again when it comes to converting those trick fourth down situations. I also thought it was interesting. I want to hit this really quick as well, being that he, spent so much time in the NFL and is only a little over a year removed from it. He weighed in and gave his thoughts on the new kickoff rule in the NFL, and if we could potentially see it in college as well. Cut number 14 here, Dave.
Raheem came up here. Raheem Morris is the head coach at the Falcons, and he and I have worked together for a couple years, and then so he started quizzing me on it. I said, hey, man, that's not my problem right now. You go ahead and take care of that, But I think if it works out, it could be something that we see down the road. I think the biggest challenge for those guys right now is going to be the personnel that's involved. Is that going to change? That's really, in the National Football League, one of the things that happens is you don't have all the players to choose from every week. So there's 48 guys that go to the game, and there's certain numbers that you always have. And I don't know if that's going to stay the same. That's going to be the biggest issue. But I think change is good if it keeps the play safe and it keeps the play in the game. Now in college it's different. We've had more returns, and people are willing to return the ball more, and it's been a safer play. So hopefully we can keep it that way.
He's right. In the college game, there are a lot more returns as opposed to the NFL game, which was creeping up into the past 70 range when it comes to their touchbacks going back to this past season. So something definitely needed to be changed. And I got to say, I applaud the NFL for making this change. The kickoff had become more ceremonial than anything when it used to be football's most exciting play. And I'm glad they are doing something to try and bring it back in the game and incentivize returns while also maintaining player safety, because that was the biggest reason why the kickoff got moved around so much and started upping the touchbacks, because they wanted the play to stay in, but they also didn't want high-speed collisions on every single kickoff, resulting in not only concussions, because that's what we think about when we think of injuries in the NFL more than anything else because of the lawsuits and stuff like that. But you also just have the general injuries of guys running down the field that can have the non-contacts, the tears, the pulls, the strains, those kind of things that can hopefully be alleviated with this XFL style kickoff that's going to see, everything kind of take place on one half of the field minus the kicker who's still kicking off from the same area, as opposed to what it's been for these past roughly decade or so. And I do think college football will eventually fall in line as well, especially if it proves more beneficial in the NFL with the numbers of, returns skyrocketing, because that is great to have in the game. And college football, because the kicker's legs aren't as strong, you do still get a fair amount more of those kick returns, but those numbers are creeping up more and more when it comes to those touchbacks. So, again, I could see that happening in college football in the very near future, and, it may be as soon as next year, for all we know, just based on what we see out of the, out of the NFL in year number one of implementing that new kickoff procedure. But if that is the case in 2025, I put a lot of faith in Joe DeCamillis, given his just experience in special teams overall for the past 30-some-odd years, of being able to come up with a really good game plan if that does end up becoming the case as far as college football is concerned. But excited to see what Joe DeCamillis is going to do. Again, tons of experience, not only from a special team standpoint, was at one point a head coach at Denver when Gary Kubiak was dealing with an illness, I believe, back in 2015. So, again, hopefully see some good things out of DeCamillis this year and great things out of special teams as a whole. Big concert coming up tonight at Colonial Life Arena. You've probably heard our advertisements here on the game during our commercial breaks. I've been informed by our guy, Dreamy Josh. We actually have two pairs of tickets to go see Sam Hunt tonight at Colonial Life Arena. And I am opening that up right now for callers number 4 and 5 at 803-404-6100. Again, 803-404-6100. Captain Dave eagerly waiting by to take your call to get you those tickets to go see Sam Hunt coming up again tonight at Colonial Life Arena. Reminder again, you can always watch us on the Game TV, sponsored by our friends over at Shepherd's Glass, and also check us out on the 107.5 The Game app. Just head to the iTunes Store or the Google Play Store, give it a download, and listen to us wherever you go. We will dive into the latest of the Kentucky men's basketball head coaching search, as it looks like they may have finally found their guy, but folks in Kentucky aren't happy about it. That's coming up. It's the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on the Game. Welcome back in. It's the Extra Point. Southern Head along with you here on the game on your Friday. Congratulations to our winners of the tickets to go see Sam Hunt over at Colonial Life Arena coming up tonight. I don't know if those are the only tickets we have. We may have more to give away later on the day if Josh lets me know about that. So stay tuned if that does end up being the case. I don't know if you maybe looked over the horizon. You may have seen the smoke signals off in the distance, but I can confirm now that the University of Kentucky has indeed hired a new head basketball coach, that being BYU's head coach and a former Kentucky basketball player himself in Mark Pope. Mark Pope just put out a statement a few minutes ago. The University of Kentucky is a pinnacle of coaching in college basketball. It's the definition of a blue blood program where hanging a banner is the expectation every year. Equally as important, UK changed my life forever as a human being. Love and passion I have for this program, the university, and the people of the Commonwealth goes to the depth of my soul. I'm thankful to Dr. Capaludo and Mitch Barnhart for this opportunity. I'm proud to be your next head coach, and I can't wait to do this together. Mitch Barnhart, very excited to be the head coach of the University of Kentucky, his alma mater. Again, the fan base of Kentucky, maybe not as excited about that. I've mentioned this before. I've been checking in with my friend Kristen. She's a huge Kentucky basketball fan over these past couple weeks, really starting out when they lost the first round game against Oakland to start the NCAA tournament, and kind of been going back and forth about, Calipari, his future. She wanted him gone, was glad when he was gone. And naturally, I texted her this morning to ask her thoughts on Mark Pope. And as I was attempting to text Mark Pope, I misspelled his last name, and thankfully I caught this before sending it, but I almost typed Mark Poop. And I will admit, I probably laughed about that really hard for 5 minutes because I have the humor of a 12-year-old. But in a way, that's almost kind of the sentiment that I get from a lot of Kentucky fans about how they feel about this hire of Mark Pope. It feels largely underwhelming. Because, again, Kentucky has not won a national championship in 12 years, since 2012 with Calipari. It's been several years since they went to their last Final Four. They've not been the standard of college basketball these past couple years, but it's still one of the premier blue blood programs of the sport. And while, yes, Calipari had underachieved in the past couple years, they still, and rightfully so, hold this position on a very high pedestal, which is why once Calipari was gone for Arkansas and they were partying in the streets of Lexington over this, they immediately turned their attention. And this isn't just the fans, by the way. This is reputable people within the media that cover Kentucky sports. Our guys over at KSR, Kentucky Sports Radio, just kind of following along their process of this search. Matt Jones being one of those guys over there, he tweeted out a couple days ago Kentucky's list of head coaching candidates: Dan Hurley, Scott Drew, and Billy Donovan. And he said I'd be surprised if it got past number 2. Well, guess what? It got past number 2. Because this job, while, again, one of the premier ones in all of college basketball, not quite as appealing as the fan base may think it is. And I think a lot of that has to do with the insanely high expectations that come along with being the head coach of the Wildcats, where if you're not in a Final Four by like year 3 or 4, they're going to be ready to run you out of town, whether that's justifiable or not. That's the standard they hold you to at Kentucky, which is why they've been ready to run Calipari out of town for these past couple years, because getting bounced in the round of 64 by St. Peter's and Oakland, only a couple years apart, that doesn't cut it. That doesn't fly. But when they started reaching out to these other candidates, we do know they reached out to Dan Hurley. He laughed it off. Scott Drew turned it down the other day. Nate Oates said he wasn't interested in the job. So one by one, all these dominoes started to fall of these huge name candidates. Billy Donovan claimed they had not reached out to him. I'm sure that they did, but it doesn't seem like he was interested in the job either. So all these big top targets kind of fall off the board, and then you kind of look around and you're like, well, there's option number 6. That's Mark Pope. And look, Mark Pope, he's a good coach. And you look at his records at, Utah Valley and BYU, they're fine. 21 seasons for the most part, 23-11 in his first year in the Big 12 with BYU this past year, finished 5th in the league standings. The thing that sticks out to me the most is no tournament wins in the NCAA tournament. They've been to like the semi and quarterfinals of the NIT and the CBI, but Kentucky fans could care less about those results. They want to know what you're doing in the month of March tournament that actually matters. And at least when you're talking about John Calipari coming in from Memphis, I mean, he was making serious noise in the NCAA tournament, obviously, which helped him land this job. Mark Pope, not so much. Again, the regular season looks fine, but John Calipari was putting together great regular seasons. He was routinely getting you to 20 wins. The problem was he couldn't get you deep in the NCAA tournament. He couldn't get you out the first round in the NCAA tournament. And Mark Pope doesn't necessarily look like he's going to do any better. If he comes to Kentucky and they win 20 games, it's like, okay, and that's what you're expected to do. In fact, only 20 wins. That's kind of low on the totem pole for Kentucky fans as far as expectations. They're going to be like, we're thinking more like 25, buddy. Let's get a little bit better than that. So I don't think that necessarily holds as much weight. They want you to go deep in the tournament. And again, he doesn't necessarily have the track record to support that. His 2 tournament appearances as a head coach in 2021, lost in the round of 64. This past year, also lost in the round of 64. Like, that's not giving me a glimmer of hope if I'm a Kentucky fan that this guy's going to suddenly come in and do anything differently than John Calipari was. And other than the fact that he's an alumni of the school, it doesn't make a lot of sense otherwise. I love message boards, especially when things like this happen, because the collective meltdown you see of fans, especially those as passionate as Kentucky fans, is pretty hilarious to watch. I did find one this morning on Message Board Geniuses that I think sums this whole process up perfectly. Because again, they've been ready to run Calipari out of town for a couple years. This member here, Jay Bev of the KSR message board, writes, maybe we were irrational. He says, we thought Cal was the girlfriend who got ugly. We treated him terribly until he finally walked out the door, went after some beautiful woman we thought we could get, got turned down, then saw a picture of the exact same Cal on Twitter and started to realize just how pretty he was. We just couldn't see it because we were together too long. That's what today feels like. I've thought Cal was hideous these past 5 years, but today he seems like he was actually kind of cute the whole time. I think that kind of echoes the sentiment of a lot of people in that fan base, that it's like, man, they could not wait to get him out of town. They could not wait to break up with him in that relationship. But then you're single and you're looking around like, okay, who's my next partner going to be? And you're realizing the hot cheerleader that's a 10 out of 10, probably not interested in you. And you may have to end up settling for the girl that maybe isn't quite as attractive. And that girl, in this sense, being Mark Pope. And why would these guys turn down the Kentucky job? Insane level of expectations, as I mentioned a moment ago. They can back up the Brinks truck to you. It was being reported that Dan Hurley was going to be offered somewhere in the neighborhood of $11 million. But he's got it made up there in UConn. He just won back-to-back national championships. He has bought good grace for a long time to come. If you win a national championship at Kentucky and then don't make a Final Four for the next 5 years, they're going to be ready to run you out of town. That's just how it is. That's how that fan base is. Whether right or wrong, that's what they expect. So if I'm a coach, if I'm a Scott Drew who's got roots down in Baylor and I have for 20 years, even if it is for more money, I wouldn't leave. Nate Oates, I thought Bruce Pearl might be the next guy on their list, but he seems to have it made out at Auburn as well, where the expectations aren't like mega super duper high, to where, yes, you don't want to get bounced in the first round by Yale by any means, but he goes on a run to like the Sweet 16 next year. Everything's good. Everybody forgets about that. Everything's cool again. There's just an insanely high standard at Kentucky, and I wish Mark Pope the best of luck, but, man, you're going to – I just feel like this is one of those getting eaten alive scenarios, unfortunately. As I mentioned, Masters coming up this weekend. My buddy Jeff Dantzler from the Superstations across South Georgia, big golf head, going to be telling us his insight on to the Masters tournament this weekend and what he's seen so far. That is coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on this Friday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on this Friday morning here on The Game. And it's going to be an exciting weekend. A lot of that revolving around the Masters out there at Augusta National. Always excited to talk some golf with my buddy Jeff Dantzler, host of the Jeff Dantzler Show on the Superstations on the Georgia Sports Radio Network. Jeff, appreciate your time as always. And a little bit of rain that pushed through yesterday, but watching the early round or the conclusion of the first round today and looking ahead at the rest of the weekend, going to be absolutely beautiful and picturesque for a great weekend of golf out there at Augusta National.
Well, it sure will, my friend, and I'm great to be on with you this morning as always. And I think what you're seeing this morning, and sometimes in golf, it can come down to the luck of the draw. If you go off early Thursday and late Friday or vice versa, sometimes you can get burned, and the wind is obviously a huge factor. I'm sure you're feeling it over in Columbia, and it was howling this morning, and it affected a lot of players, including Brian Harmon, Georgia alum, who won the British Open and really struggled on the second nine. Jordan Spieth made a quad bogey on number 15. So for the best of the best, it can get them. And a lot of times in golf, and especially at the Masters, it's about surviving those rough patches and then giving yourself a chance. And I think this morning was a prime example. Nobody was going to win the tournament this morning, but you sure could lose it.
Absolutely. We saw Tiger Woods slipping a couple of holes here in the later rounds of the later holes of the first round as he concluded this morning thanks to that weather delay yesterday. And we'll get to him in just a moment. I do want to start off with this, though. Scottie Scheffler coming in red hot to this year's Masters, much like he did back in 2022 when they won the whole thing, been the top of the world golf rankings for a while now. A lot of people think this is his Masters to lose, currently sitting one stroke behind Bryson DeChambeau through one round so far. What is your view of Scottie Scheffler and his opportunity to win this weekend?
Well, he was certainly amongst the favorites. I thought the four big favorites, and three of them are pretty much out of the picture. So, Tyler, I'm glad I didn't bet all your money on that one. But I thought Matsuyama, Scheffler, and Rahm, the three most recent champions, and Koepka were the four favorites coming in my mind. And Scheffler, once again, has jumped up. And when you look at what he's done, he's defying some history here. Nobody had ever won the Players' Championship back-to-back. He's done that. Only one player has ever won the Masters and the Players in the same year. That was Tiger Woods back in 2001. And Scheffler's put himself in a position to do that. He's been so good, and I'm about to use only in air quotes here. You do have to remind yourself he's only won the one major, the 2022 Masters. He's knocked on the door at a U.S. Open. He's knocked on the door at a PGA. And, of course, he's won the two Players' Championships. But with Scheffler, with his complete game, you know, the biggest word in the English language has two letters, if his putting is somewhere from decent to good, I think he's the guy to beat because the ball striking and his placement, it's just exquisite right now.
Again, talking to my buddy Jeff Dantzler, host of the Jeff Dantzler Show on the Superstations across South Georgia. And it goes without saying, this is obviously a very, very hard tournament to win. You mentioned Jon Rahm coming in as one of the favorites after picking up the victory a season ago, currently sitting at 1 over through the first round of play. And history, at least recent history, has not been kind to Masters winners the next year. A lot of those guys struggling to crack the top 10. Some of them don't even make the cut the year following. Why is it so hard to have a follow-up performance at the Masters?
I just think there's so much that goes into it. The great Seve Ballesteros, who was one of Jon Rahm's heroes, the famous Spaniard. Seve won the green jacket in 80 and 83 and missed the cut the next year both times. I think hosting the Champions Dinner, there's maybe a little bit more pressure that goes with that. And that's a great stat you pull up. And in fact, Tyler, if you go back to 2011, the 2011 Masters, Mickelson won it in 2010. Going back to Charles Schwartzel's win in 2011, of the last 13 Masters, 9 of the winners have been first-time major winners, and 11 of the 13, it's been their first Masters. Dustin Johnson won in 2020. He had won a U.S. Open. Rahm won last year. He had also won a U.S. Open. So the only repeat winners over that time are Bubba Watson, another Georgia golfer, who won it in 2014 as well as 2012, and then Tiger, who won his 5th green jacket in 2019. So it's just one of those trends, and this tends to happen at the Masters. I mean, there was a stretch there from 51 to 54. It went Hogan Snead, Hogan Snead. From 60 through 66, it went Palmer, Player, Palmer, Nicklaus, Palmer, Nicklaus, Nicklaus. And then you had that great stretch from the late 70s through the early 80s where you went Nicklaus to Raymond Floyd to Tom Watson to Gary Player to Fuzzy to Seve, back to Watson again. And then, of course, you had the runs that Tiger and Phil had in the 0-0s. You know, it went Phil, Tiger, Phil from 04 to 06. And right now we're just in one of those stretches where you're just having a lot of really good players having that breakthrough come at Augusta.
Well, Bryson DeChambeau, as I mentioned, sitting at the top of the leaderboard after one round. He has a major win to his credit at the U.S. Open back in 2020. I was listening to his presser yesterday after round number 1, and he was talking about the LIV schedule benefiting him a little bit more when it comes to a tournament like this. Do you believe something like that to be the case, that maybe playing a little bit less golf on the LIV Tour actually benefits you in a tournament like this?
Well, for whatever suits different people, I don't think you've seen a huge effect. Koepka won the PGA last year because they're playing 54 holes. And I have a hard time watching the LIV. You know, it comes on the CW, and as Club Pro guy wrote, you know, if they run over the allotted time, it gets bumped for One Tree Hill. But just when it comes on, seeing the guys in shorts throws me off. And then also just that leaderboard down the left side, Tyler, I feel like I'm watching a NASCAR race there. So I think, like most golf fans, we just haven't paid a whole lot of attention to LIV. Maybe not going through the grind as much as that week to week. There could be something to that. Now, it's also it's a 54-hole event. So is that going to translate playing that extra 18? We'll see. DeChambeau, love him, not like him, whatever it is, he's definitely one of the more polarizing figures out there, probably second only to Patrick Reed when it comes to the number of just genuine dislikes by golf fans for whatever reason. But he's got the game to do it. And, you know, he came out just firing hot yesterday. We'll see if he can keep that up and at the very least keep himself into contention. But he's put himself in position, no doubt.
Last one for you here. Got a slide of Tiger question in. Started off really well yesterday with that birdie on hole number 1, and was holding pretty strong through the first, really over half of the first round. But again, had to wrap up his first round today thanks to that weather delay yesterday. Slipped on the last couple of holes. Is currently sitting at 1 over right now. But a lot of people weren't expecting a whole lot of Tiger Woods this weekend. May not even make it through second round in a lot of people's eyes. What have you seen from Tiger so far, you know, through one round of play?
He just gets those competitive juices flowing, and if he is able to make the cut, he would break the record that he now shares with Fred Couples and Gary Player for the most consecutive cuts made, which is sitting at 23. This is his 26th start in a Masters. And basically for Tiger now, he's 48 years old, coming off all the injuries and the surgeries. I'd still think because it's generally flatter, he can be competitive at the British Open, but if it gets too cold, that back can seize up. I think the U.S. Open and the PGA, the conditions are just really, really tough. But I think for him, he does have a chance to make the cut. Now, then if you're talking about the odds are he would finish near the bottom of the players who made the cut, just because I think that the grind is too arduous. I mean, Augusta National, it's hilly, it's steep, it's tough to get around. And the fact that he's out there with all the injuries he's had and he's still able to compete, I think is extremely impressive.
Well, certainly going to be a lot of eyes on Tiger this weekend. Hopefully you enjoy catching all the Masters stuff yourself. I know it's your favorite weekend of the year.
It's sure, just like you with Daytona. And actually, Georgia baseball, David Johnson and I call the Bulldog baseball games just like Derek Scott does for South Carolina. And we've got a Thursday through Saturday series, so I'll be over there Sunday. And I do want to pass on. It's the first time I've been on you since. And I know, Tyler, so many of us around the SEC, just our condolences to the Gamecock Nation for the loss of Tommy Moody. He was a friend to all, and I had actually been texting with Tommy about 7-8 days before he passed away. He found a picture when he was sitting on the front row of the famous 1980 Georgia-South Carolina game with Herschel Walker and George Rogers, and it was just heartbreaking news, and I know we're all missing him this baseball season.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate the sentiments there, Jeff, and we'll check in with you here in a couple weeks as we get set for South Carolina taking on Georgia on the baseball diamond. Appreciate it as always, buddy. We'll come back and wrap up hour number 2. Well, welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on your Friday on the Game. Again, thanks to my friend Jeff Dantzler for joining us there for a couple minutes talking about the Masters. Real quick, before we jump back into some golf talk, A reminder about the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway going on all baseball season long. Anytime a Gamecock hitter hits a Grand Slam, you can win all the money in the pot. That pot is currently over $800 right now, so we're still waiting on that first Grand Slam from a Gamecock hitter this season. If that happens this weekend against Florida, you could be the lucky winner. Just go online to 1075thegame.com and enter for your chance to win the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. You know, Masters, it's just as much about golf as it is about the food. And I got to bring in our resident foodie, Captain Dave, here to discuss the concessions at the Masters, because it's kind of taken on like this cult-like following, right? Because in everything else going on in the world, food prices are so ridiculously high. Whether you go into the movies, a ball game, just even the grocery store. Like, you can't get things for good prices anymore. I sent you the concession stand prices for Augusta National, which are still, like, a couple things raised by like 50 cents, but still very, very low. What sticks out to you from this list of things if you had, say, $5, $6 to go grab something at the concession stand?
Well, let's see. I'd give me a pimento cheese because I hear it's the best in the world.
Supposedly. Now, I'm not a pimento cheese person. Yeah. Is that un-Southern of me?
No, I think because I don't love it either. I would not choose that as a regular thing.
Like, the smell of it just, it turns me off.
Very tart.
Yeah, I don't get it. I know people put it on like chicken sandwiches and stuff like that. It's not for me.
Yeah. Then domestic beer, I like that. What's $5?
Yeah, so the funny thing about the Masters is nothing is name brand. Everything is Masters branded. Now, I'm sure the soft drink is probably Coca-Cola, but it's just referred to as like cola, and they serve it to you in a non-discrete cup where you can't really tell the difference. Same thing with potato chips and all that kind of stuff. Like, nothing is branded. It is literally just soft drink or beer or peanuts or whatever.
Now, that's interesting. That's very interesting.
But again, like, the Masters brand itself has the ability to do that, I guess. Yeah. I don't think you can go at any other sporting event and just get away with calling these things without having the actual name brand associated with it. You can also buy like the party kits too. Like, they will, like, you can buy like, it's like quarts of pimento cheese and barbecue and stuff like that. So you can have like your own Masters experience at home, I suppose. Which that may be the closest I ever get to getting into Augusta National. So I might have to check that out sometime.
The thing that I think I would really like is Georgia peach ice cream sandwich.
That is the one that a lot of people talk about, like especially for a weekend like this where it's going to be, in the low 80s by the time Sunday rolls around. Been out there all day. It's nice and hot. That sounds like it would hit the spot.
Yeah, I love peach ice cream anyway, and that just looks like the thing I would definitely want.
Yeah, for sure. Did you hear Gunner the other day trying the egg salad?
Yeah, I heard
from the Masters.
He didn't like it at all.
No, see, I wouldn't like that either. I'm not an egg person. It's just the consistencies. It's just the mouthfeel. You know what I mean? It's not for me.
Because I love it.
You like egg salad?
Sure.
Okay, well, maybe we should have given you the sandwich then.
Yeah. Do they have potato salad?
I do not believe so. It's a very short menu, which, like, for me, I actually enjoy restaurants that have like a very small menu because that tells me there's more of like a singular focus on what you have as opposed to like, all right, we got 20 pages here. I can get everything from fried chicken to, I don't know, stir fry. Like, all right, well, maybe if you cut this menu in half, maybe the food might taste a little bit better.
Yeah. The only thing, I see that all these prices are so low and so great and everything. But how much does it cost to get in?
Now, that's the thing here. You are paying for the ticket. The price of admission is quite high. So you're kind of, I guess, not quite making up for it, but at least they're not gouging you at the concession stand in addition to already having expensive tickets.
That's true.
So, and if you're
When are you going?
Huh?
When are you going?
Sometime in the future, I hope. I feel like I'm the only person around here that hasn't been.
I haven't been.
Like, did we talk to Jack earlier? He went earlier this week. Chris and I were like, are we the only two people here that have not gone to Augusta National? I'm like, I guess so. And God, I've lived in Georgia for 20 some odd years of my life, worked in sports media for almost a decade now, and that opportunity's never come up. So maybe next year.
Yeah. Well, let's hope for it.
Well, if so, we will collaborate and we will get Masters food one way or the other, Dave.
Put
we
your
got to try this stuff.
in now.
Yeah, I feel like you really have to. Honestly, like the ticket getting process, it is like, it's not easy. Like there are people that I know that go for tickets every single year, and they wait for that email address to find out if they even got tickets or not. And that's almost like a rejection letter from Harvard, it feels like.
Yeah, and you can't do anything wrong, I hear.
No, you can't. Like, you have to be as pristine can be. Like, being a part of Augusta National Golf Club itself, you better be a high-ranking member of society, and they don't just let anyone in.
It's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing. Like, it's a who's who certainly out there, and hopefully one day I can see the inside of it myself. But I will settle for watching on TV and the beautiful scenes for right now. But excited for a great weekend of golf, and again, round 2 getting rolling here very, very soon. That'll do it for today's edition of the Extra Point. Coming up next is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Myself, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark here on the game.